Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Undisrupted podcast. We are coming to you live from the Future Ready Schools Tech Leaders Virtual Summit. And you know, Adam, we always start out with a fun question. So before we introduce our guests, I have to ask you this because we love acronyms and education. So I have to ask you, what does ESSER mean? ESSER. Tell me your best guess. What does it stand for?
I think we're running out of acronyms now. We're just running consonants and vowels all together.
Smash them together.
Let's see. Education saves students everywhere.
See, I thought it was educational super strategies for education reform, because you got to have education twice in there. Yes. But our guest today is Phillip Lovell, and he actually comes to us from Future Ready Schools and the Alliance for Excellence in Education. And he has a better answer for us. Phillip, what does ESSER actually stand for?
You guys are terrific. Thanks for having me. So it is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund.
So we didn't get a single one word right out of all of that, but we took some good guesses.
The spirit that you had is definitely in the right direction.
So I guess with ESSER and with CARES 1 and CARES 2, the American Rescue Plan, we have all this different funding now. And so for our tech leaders out there that are watching this during the event, but also for those listening later, what does all this mean for schools when it comes to technology specifically? All of these funds, the CARES 1, CARES 2, and all that. What does that mean for schools with tech?
Gotcha. So, I think it's important to maybe we can start with sort of the basic structure of the different money that's going to be made available, because there's money that's going to be made available through the Departments of Education, and there's money that's going to be made available from the Federal Communications Commission.
Okay.
And those two pots of money can be used for similar things, but they will probably have different rules, right? And so districts will be in the driver's seat to figure out like what to use where. Mm-hmm. So under ESSER, the Elementary and Secondary School Education Fund, the rules that have been in place thus far for from CARES Act to the funding that was made available from Congress back in December to the American Rescue Plan Act, the provisions pertaining to education technology basically stayed the same.
Okay.
So if you've used ESSER money for technology over the last several months, you'll be able to do the same moving forward. The difference in the ESSER funding that from the American Rescue Plan Act versus the CARES Act and versus the bill that passed in December is really two things. One is that the American Rescue Plan Act is a lot bigger.
Yeah. Yes.
So
like
right,
3 times larger, right?
So, oh my God. So for the CARES Act, about $12 billion from the CARES Act went to K-12. All right. In December, Congress passed more than an additional $50 billion. Wow. And then the American Rescue Plan Act, we're looking at $123 billion.
Wow.
For K-12.
So 10 times the original.
So this is orders of magnitude bigger than the CARES Act. And think about what your district gets for Title I, right? Nationally, it's about $16 billion. So this in one fell swoop, this is so really over the course of the last year, districts have gotten, will be getting about $200 billion. Right. Oh. So with ESSER, the new information that'll be coming from the Department of Education, it might clarify some allowable uses, but anything that you have been doing, you should be able to continue doing.
The funny thing with that, though, I think a lot of vendors have been following.
Oh, their ears just went like this. Like $200 billion. What's going on? Yeah.
I know my inbox is filling up right now as we speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, we're from the perspective of, those who are really committed to public education, this is a huge opportunity, and it's also a huge risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right? Because you can't hide under the covers with $200 billion.
Yeah.
Right. And so like we really have to spend this money well and demonstrate outcomes for kids and communicate that to policymakers and the public to maintain the support for public education. And a lot of us have been saying that, schools are under-resourced, specific populations of students definitely under-resourced. Well, we just got an additional $200 million.
Yeah.
And so, so we really need to make the most of it.
Yeah, with great funding comes great accountability.
Exactly.
It's a different Spider-Man reference, but I like it. Yeah, I know. It's interesting because already the public perception of this is mixed. I would say too, from the layman, the taxpayers out there on the street who I've been talking to, with a mask on, of course. Those people have said to me like, "Hey, that's the last thing. Educate. Now we're going to throw more money, and they're going to just waste that money. It's just we don't know what it's going to go to, and it's just going to make it into some sort of weird slush fund." Like that we have a lot of that in education, and I'm laughing thinking we've been so underfunded for years and decades. My goodness, we're probably maybe going to catch up at this point, but I'm sure there's other things we have to consider too. But I guess that's a perception again from people that aren't in the educational circles we're going to have to encounter and deal with our parent community.
Well, and unfortunately, perception is reality, right?
Yeah.
And so we but we need to. So for those who were around during the stimulus package in 2009, when President Obama first took office, you might remember, driving down the road and you see these signs that says, paid for by the American Rescue and Reinvestment Act, or Recovery and Reinvestment Act. I think that it would be great for districts, where there are specific ways that these dollars are being put to use, to be really public about it.
Yeah.
We really need to demonstrate that these dollars are being put to good use, and otherwise, I really fear that we could be just undercutting the whole notion that we have around we need resources for public education.
Yeah, because when you look at it, I mean, this is not the first time we've gotten an influx of cash into education. You had the Reading First or money that was out there years ago. You had Race to the Top. So there's been opportunities to do some things, nothing of this magnitude, but often we run into the situation where the money's here and we do certain things, but one is an outcome based, what's going to be the outcome that we're getting from this. And then it's that piece that comes in. What do you do when the money's gone? Because if you're buying, or I was saying buying people services or additional supports, what happens when those dollars go away? So that's the dilemma that I see really happening.
I think that is the multi-billion-dollar question, because these dollars will be available for use for the next 2, maybe 3 years, and then what?
Yeah.
And so it's how do we find ways to spend these dollars that will meet needs today without creating more needs come 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's just, we just need continued dialogue, continued good ideas for that. And we should be excited about what we have now. There's with the money that's coming down the pike, there should be no reason why a student should be going without a laptop.
Yep.
So let me ask you this: with that being said, because you kind of mentioned this earlier, anytime you get dollars from the feds, there's always guidelines, stipulations kind of attached to it. So with that being said, are there any particular guidelines that says a certain percentage has to go to this, that, and the third? And with those guidelines, because I've done a lot of work dealing with Title I and Title I districts that I've worked in, and I know they have their auditing, Title I auditing, and things of that. So has there been any guidance so far given on percentages that have to be spent? And if so, how are we going to expect to be audited on this in the future?
Great question. So the other difference between the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan Act, other than just the size of it, is that there are now some additional sort of set asides that states and districts need to know about. So one of them is that at the state level, 1% of the funds have to be spent on summer learning, summer enrichment. Another 1% has to be spent on comprehensive after-school programs. And 5% has to be spent on learning loss. That's at the state level. At the district level, at least 20% has to be spent on learning loss.
Wow. Okay.
Now it's important to also recognize that the statute is really broad, and so when it says you have to spend at least 20% on learning loss, what does that mean? Districts will still be in the driver's seat largely to figure out what that means. The statute says that it has to be focused on evidence-based activities that meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of students, and that we have to specifically look at populations of students that have been historically underserved. Like students with homelessness, students with disabilities, children in foster care, English learners. So it's definitely it is an equity focused play here that the Congress made, but those provisions are what really what set aside or what make ESSER this go around different from ESSER under CARES. There will be guidance coming out from the Department of Education that will specify, I think, more about what this means and more about reporting requirements. And then on top of that, just states will be providing information to districts. So there's more info to come, but structurally from the statute, those are the big issues.
I feel like that learning loss.
With that money, with that money, you got to know where it's being spent, and it has to be spent in the right places. But I do like that they're giving the power to the districts. My hope and prayer is that the right people are in place to do that in the districts, and this doesn't become the fourth job of someone else in a smaller district. So they already have wearing multiple hats, and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we're putting millions of dollars in your hands, figure it out and make it work.
Yeah.
I see larger districts kind of figuring out, but sometimes these medium to small size districts, this is like the fourth job someone else has on their plate.
Yeah, and I think when you think about tech leaders, who are watching this or listening to this, they're probably, I hope I'm at the table when those discussions are being made, because oftentimes sometimes we're not at the table when those discussions are happening. And a lot of this funding, specifically around learning loss, technology is going to play a huge role in that part of it, whether it be the software, the hardware, connectivity. So how does that play into this, like broadband and home connectivity? Because I know that's something that we've been pushing for lately, especially at the federal level, is to get everybody to have some access. And then tell me a little bit about that, but also how does that tie into E-rate, or is there any association there?
So that is a really important point. And it'll be important for districts to determine what money you want to use from ESSER for technology versus what money you want to use from E-rate for technology, because you have a lot more flexibility with your ESSER money than you do with your E-rate money. Mm-hmm. So it probably makes sense to do everything that you can through E-rate rather than spending your ESSER dollars on the tech stuff unless you need to, because the new money will be coming from E-rate, and you'll be able to use it in different ways. So in the past, E-rate was all about telecommunications, internet access, now Wi-Fi in the school building. The American Rescue Plan Act provides $7 billion, which is what's interesting is like, say $7 billion in comparison to $122 billion, like $7 billion, what do you mean? $7 million before $122 billion, like $7 billion.
I know,
right? Let's put the Rescue Plan Act as sort of the ESSER fund aside for just a moment, so that we're not disappointed on $7 billion for technology.
Now, keep in mind, this is not Jeff Bezos' money, but
right? This
is maybe Kanye West money.
That's what he makes drinking a cup of coffee in the morning. That's what Bezos makes. But yes.
So and those dollars will be able to be used to support high-speed home internet access and devices. So it is E-rate 2.0.
Okay.
And it's really intended to close the homework gap. Yeah. So the good news is that it's there. The bad news is that, Congress passed the bill about a year after schools closed, and now schools are reopening. Thank you, Capitol Hill. But it's there now. And, we knew that the homework gap existed before COVID. It'll be with us after COVID unless we do something about it. So, so you're totally right that, the technology will play a really important role in addressing the learning loss that's taking place because of the pandemic. And districts will have, money in place to address it. Now, the money, once that $7 billion is gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
Right.
And similar to the ESSER funds, I mean, obviously there are a lot more of them, but like you were saying, the sort of the cliff, right? Once they're spent, they're spent. I definitely, it is important from a policy perspective that we spend these dollars well, but also, with some sense of urgency, because money laying around to policymakers means that money is not needed.
Yeah.
And then of course you got to balance that with, well, I'd rather have money spent well that takes a little bit longer than money that's spent now that just, you may as well just throw it on the road and, drive over it.
Right.
So
because as tech folks, we know something's going to break at some point. So we also want to keep that money in the coffers
just in case. Yeah.
Okay, switches are going down. I mean, do we just buy new switches just because we have the money to buy new switches? And, because we're used to, squeezing blood out of a turnip and trying to get every last drop we can out of things. So sometimes we may find ourselves replacing things ahead of time to kind of future proof. But let me ask you with that, because I've also have been in communication, and I'm sure a lot of CTOs and tech directors have as well. Some of these telecommunications folks are trying to partner with some districts to kind of finish that last mile and say, hey, you guys have your own spectrum out there. Let's go ahead and we're going to put some towers out here, and we need some financial partners to do this. So really getting K-12 districts into this telecommunications world, kind of, sort of, not really. So it's one of those weird things when you talk about having the money and something that once the money spent is good because you've kind of built that infrastructure to kind of help connect homes. But is that going to be an allowable expense? Or districts, do they want to get in that avenue? So I don't know.
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to more substantial infrastructure build out, there is additional legislation that's pending that's going to look more towards the infrastructure build out. I think that the idea behind these dollars was more that it would help to fund internet subscriptions, that it would help to fund hotspots, that it would help to fund connected devices. We'll see as the regulations roll out, and that'll take place over the next less than 60 days. What additional details get added and what specific allowable uses end up being, but they're really contemplated to be more around, I think, like paying for internet access, really addressing affordability, or addressing the affordability issues as opposed to to major infrastructure build out.
And I think you just hit another point there when you talked about the hotspots. I was thinking back to what you were saying earlier. I mean, hotspots themselves have a one-time cost, but then there's the continual cost of maintaining those monthlies. So we have to budget that. As tech leaders, we have to budget what that's going to look like when the funding's all dried up. So maybe we bought the things, but now they're just bricks because we can't pay for the subscription anymore.
Exactly. And so, and that's the what we need to continually be educating our policymakers on is exactly that point. If I can pay for this for 12 months, that's great. Come month 13, the need is still there, the cost is still there. If the dollars are not still there, then the student doesn't have internet access.
Right.
And so we need to be really clear with policymakers about, we provided this number of hotspots to this many students, and this is great, and we have this, we're taking care of this for the next X number of months. And and we will need to continue that.
So with everything you said, this has been a wealth of information to all of the listeners and everyone who's attending on this live summit. But is there a place that you could like point us to where we can find more information, or as things change and you're able to put more information out there? Where can we go? Where can we go to learn more without reading the 680 some odd page document that the feds have put out?
You mean not everyone likes to do that?
The Cliff Notes, just the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, I mean, I did watch that.
The Phil Notes, the Phillip Notes.
That episode of C-SPAN. I mean, it was so amazing on C-SPAN. I binge watched the whole, 8-hour reading of it. I mean, it was,
riveting.
Yes,
yeah,
better than the Snyder Cut.
Yeah.
So, we will be making information available, through Future Ready to districts. We've got a one-pager that describes the broad contours of the legislation that we'll be sure to make available to folks. And as guidance comes out from the feds, we'll be sure to make it available to the Future Ready districts.
Yeah. And as the kids
we provide regular updates on federal education policy that's both relevant specifically to ESSER, but also more broadly, we do this thing called Federal Flash. It's 5 to 7 minute videos once every couple of weeks that gives an update on what's happening in DC and education policy. And so as things come out, we'll be reporting on that as well. So
as the kids say, make sure you look for the link in the description below.
Yeah,
we'll have the link to all that there.
Subscribe and follow. Well, thank you, Phillip. This is Phillip Lovell, everybody, from Future Ready Schools, the Alliance for Excellence in Education. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast and at the virtual summit.
My pleasure.
Check out all those resources at futureready.org, and also keep an eye out for those federal flashes. Those sound interesting. So 5 to 7 minute little videos, kind of give us some updates, better than listening to the Snyder cut of the C-SPAN that Adam mentioned there earlier. This has been a special edition of the Undisrupted Podcast, live during the Future Ready Schools Tech Leaders Virtual Summit. He's Adam, and you can follow him at AskAdam3.
And he's Carl, and you can follow him at Mr. Hooker. And remember, we are better together.
And we are better undisrupted. This podcast is made possible by the generous support of Amazon Web Services.